The Conservative Jacob Rees-Mogg joins us. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
And this is the tabling of this amendment, the apparent moving of Labour position would suggest that whatever you manage to secure from the government now on what you might term a hard Brexit, leaving the single market and leaving the customs union, it can't get past the House of Commons.
Well, we have to wait and see whether it will get past the House of Commons. But the key thing is that if we remain in the customs union or a customs union, we'll be subject to the common external tariff, and that means higher prices for food, clothing and footwear. So people who want a customs union want higher prices affecting the poorest in our society most. It's quite extraordinary that the Labour Party wants to penalise a section of society that it tries to appeal to electorally and make their standard of living lower.
Of course, if we left the customs union, then we would be in a situation where, yes, we might be able to strike trade deals, but the common external tariffs would apply to anything we sent to the EU. So there would still be extra costs.
No, hold on. The common external tariff would then be under our own jurisdiction. Do you think any sensible government would put an average 26% tariff on food and over 11% both on clothing and footwear, penalising the poorest in our society?
But the costs would come in a different way. We've learned that. We've been told that very clearly by the EU. You cannot have your cake and eat it.
Where would they come? We wouldn't be imposing penalties on British consumers, and a lot of the goods that are protected under the common external tariff aren't made in the United Kingdom. For example, we protect Spanish oranges. Well, even in Somerset, which has the most glorious climate, we can't grow oranges.
But the idea of something coming from the EU, where any trade that we do with the EU, there are going to be extra costs, and that is going to add costs here.
Not that we're going to impose. Why should we impose any extra costs?
We may not be imposing them, but the EU will.
Well, we can try and negotiate an agreement as with Canada. That's what Mr. Barnier has himself suggested, that we have a Canada-based arrangement to allow free trade. And the WTO has systems for the recognition of standards. I think we're trying to find problems where they don't really exist, and we're trying to miss out on the advantages, which are cheaper food, clothing and footwear, as I said, particularly beneficial to the poorest in our society and giving them a boost to their standard of living.
What would it do to agriculture in this tariff-free world?
It depends how you impose the tariff and what you do in terms of regulation for our farmers at the same time. But the first thing to do, the easiest thing to do, is to lift all the tariffs on those goods that we do not produce in the United Kingdom, which I would like us to do on the 30th of March 2019, an immediate boost to our economy and an immediate boost to the standard of living of the poorest in our society.
One of the things that we understand came out of the Chequers meeting yesterday, and Jeremy Hunt flagged up at 8:10 this morning, is that there will be some areas, and he used the example of the automotive area, where we can agree to align our regulations with the EU after Brexit. Do you like the sound of that?
I think if we determine the regulations, we will inevitably find that some regulations that we have and that the EU has are the same. A lot of international standards are set above the EU level and are accepted by countries around the world, and that's a perfectly reasonable thing for a sovereign nation to do, to say that we want to ensure that our goods can be sold globally, and that you always have to accept the standards of a country that you are exporting to. When we sell things to the EU, we've always had to accept their standards. When we sell to China, we have to accept their standards. So as long as it's under our control, then that's fine. What we mustn't be is a rule taker. We must avoid being the vassal state.
And the other point that we understand, according to the Times that came out of this meeting yesterday, is that there has been a suggestion that anyone who arrives from the EU during the transition period, after we leave in just over a year's time, they would be allowed to stay permanently, and it's being suggested that it's a U-turn. Do you think that could be an acceptable deal, that during transition somebody who arrives can stay?
Well, Mrs. May said when she was in China that she wasn't going to do that, and that people who came after we'd left would be subject to different conditions, which seems absolutely right. You have to remember we are leaving the European Union on the 29th of March. We will be out of the treaties on that date. We will not have any say in the rules that are made. Therefore, people who come after that date ought not to be allowed to have the full and permanent free movement rights. That would be quite wrong. And they will know the conditions on which they come, which is important. So it's fair to people who come after that date. And I'd be astonished if Mrs. May would make a U-turn of that kind. She's a lady of great backbone, and for her to cut out of the European Union is, I think, unconscionable.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you very much.
You didn't, frankly, have the balls to put country before party.